Welcome to Good Talk English Podcast.
I want you to imagine just for a second that you could actually design the perfectly padded life.
Oh man, that sounds like the absolute dream, right?
Right, like you get to remove all the sharp edges, all the rough patches, every single minor inconvenience is just gone.
You get exactly what you want whenever you want it.
Exactly. And you never, ever have to struggle. But, and this is our mission today, we are unpacking a fascinating source text called The Hidden Cost of Comfort. And it reveals this massive paradox.
Yeah, a really counterintuitive one.
Yeah. Why the very things that you strive for every single day, like ease, a peaceful life, less stress, why those things might actually be slowly, systematically stealing your strength.
It's such a brilliant concept to examine because, we almost never question our desire for softness and ease.
No, never. It's just the default. Right.
It is the default setting of the modern human condition. We're just, biologically wired to seek out the path of least resistance to conserve energy.
Right. Which made sense thousands of years ago.
Exactly. But the framework we're looking at today asks a really vital question. What actually happens to us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually when we get exactly what we want and we never have to face internal friction?
And to really grasp that, I think we have to look at how the source text redefines what comfort even means in today's world.
Yeah, because it's not just about, upgrading to a softer mattress.
Right, or buying a luxury car or whatever.
Yeah.
We're talking about the total avoidance of internal friction. We've basically reached a point where we can completely avoid being alone with our own thoughts.
That is the defining shift right there. We have engineered the friction totally out of our daily lives.
Oh, totally.
Think about the specific modern comforts the text mentions that have become just completely normalized. The ability to order a meal or a gadget or a ride instantly to your doorstep without speaking to a single human being.
Yeah, literally zero human interaction required.
Yeah, right. And the normalization of, watching other people live their lives on a screen for 5 hours a day instead of going out and risking the vulnerability of actually living your own.
Which is wild when you really think about it.
But the text points out that the most insidious comfort is our newfound ability to escape boredom and silence the literal millisecond they occur.
Oh, man. We all know that exact visceral feeling. Like, picture this. It's 11:30 p.m. You're lying in bed. The room is dark. The house is totally quiet.
The worst time for the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this tiny, faint wave of anxiety starts to creep in. Maybe it's about a work deadline tomorrow or some difficult conversation you need to have or just, a general sense of existential dread.
Which is perfectly normal, by the way.
Right, it's normal. But before you even consciously register that anxiety, what happens? Your thumb has already reached over, grabbed the glowing rectangle off your nightstand, and you're swiping.
Yep. Instinctively.
You are swiping specifically to avoid the quiet. So by constantly dodging boredom with a screen, are we basically confusing a lack of friction for actual happiness? It's kind of like putting your brain in a permanent cast.
That is a perfect analogy. Because if you never let a muscle bear weight, what happens?
It atrophies.
It completely atrophies. And the text has this really profound insight that anchors this whole idea. It argues that people feel deeply empty today, not because modern life is unbearably hard.
Which is what we usually tell ourselves.
Right, but the text says they feel empty because nothing challenges them deeply anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, it creates a society that the source describes as highly overstimulated but underdeveloped.
Overstimulated but underdeveloped. That's a heavy phrase.
It really is. We have this endless supply of cheap dopamine hits keeping us perpetually overstimulated. But the emotional muscles required to sit with our own thoughts or process complex emotions.
They're just wasting away.
Exactly, because we never use them.
Okay, but if avoiding friction makes us so underdeveloped, I have to push back a little here.
Sure, go for it.
Because why is society actively encouraging this? We're constantly told by everyone, therapists, self-help books, influencers on the internet, to protect our peace.
Oh, everywhere. It's the ultimate buzzword.
Yeah. We're told to cut out negativity, heavily curate our social feeds, set boundaries, romanticize our lives 24/7. So isn't setting those boundaries and prioritizing a peaceful environment actually a good thing for mental health?
It's a really valid contradiction to point out. And obviously, setting a boundary to prevent actual abuse or severe burnout is necessary.
Right, of course.
But the text reveals the hidden trap here. It argues that modern culture has twisted this concept of protecting your peace. We've basically started falsely equating peace with never feeling uncomfortable.
Ah, okay, so we're confusing safety with just avoiding hard things.
Exactly. And the source makes a really bold claim.
Yeah.
Genuine, meaningful growth almost never feels peaceful.
Right, I mean, it usually feels messy.
It feels embarrassing. It feels lonely, difficult, and sometimes deeply disappointing because you have to actually confront your own flaws.
Yeah, stepping out of your comfort zone usually makes your heart race and your palms sweat. It doesn't feel peaceful at all.
Not at all. But society, especially on social media, often rebrands this avoidance as empowerment. And the text specifically notes this happens particularly for women.
How so? Like, what does that look like in practice?
Well, the text discusses how social media has created this echo chamber that teaches women that being highly emotionally reactive is a form of empowerment.
Interesting.
There's this idea that your feelings should completely dictate your decisions, and that getting constant attention and external validation equals self-worth.
Wow. Okay, because the source actually contrasts that heavily, doesn't it? Like, its definition of true feminine strength is totally different.
Completely.
Yeah, looking at the text, it defines real strength as having emotional control. It talks about patience and wisdom. And it specifically mentions knowing when to speak and, having the restraint to know when not to speak.
Which takes massive internal discipline.
Right. And it talks about knowing your intrinsic worth without needing a constant drip of external reassurance.
Exactly. Because if you need constant external validation, you're outsourcing your emotional regulation to the outside world.
Yeah.
And that makes you incredibly fragile.
Which brings us right to the next major consequence the source talks about. If we falsely equate all discomfort with negativity, that just has to be cut out.
We completely lose the ability to handle inevitable adversity.
Right, and it leads straight to this epidemic of fragility. We're seeing people completely break down the absolute second life becomes inconvenient.
Yeah, the text highlights some really specific triggers for this.
Yeah, like being utterly destroyed by one single rejection, or one piece of mild criticism, or just entirely unraveling because of one hard season in life.
Because they've built their entire lives around avoiding friction. When you do that, you're building a house on a foundation of feelings. And feelings are basically just shifting sand.
Okay, but I have another question for you on that. The text warns against building an entire life around feelings.
Yeah.
But we are such emotional creatures by design.
Right, absolutely.
So if we don't build our lives on how we feel, what happens when we inevitably wake up unmotivated? Because, everyone has those days where you just don't feel like doing anything.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And the expert analysis in the text hits this right on the head. It argues that feelings constantly change. There are going to be days you won't feel motivated, confident, productive, or faithful.
Guaranteed.
But your character is built in the exact moments you decide to push forward anyway.
So it's about the action superseding the emotion.
Exactly. And when comfort and feelings rule your life, the text notes some pretty stark outcomes. For men, it often leads to profound passivity.
Passivity, like just completely checking out.
Yeah, because real-world failure stings too much when you aren't used to friction. So they retreat into comfortable digital distractions. And for women, as we mentioned, it often manifests as an intense emotional dependence on validation.
So both groups just entirely lose their resilience, just in different ways.
Exactly. You preserve your comfort, but you forfeit your strength.
Wow. Okay, if we take all of this in, I have to pause and reflect here, because I want to make sure we aren't swinging the pendulum too far the other way.
Right. We don't want to go to extremes.
Yeah, like, does this mean we are supposed to actively seek out misery? Should we be sleeping on the floor and throwing away our smartphones just to build character? What is the healthy middle ground here between fragility and endless suffering?
That is such a crucial nuance. And the source actually provides a really balanced perspective on this. It brings in an Islamic perspective, and to impartially report what the text lays out here, it clarifies that believers are absolutely not taught to hate comfort.
Oh, okay. So it's not about punishing yourself.
Not at all. The text says it is perfectly fine to enjoy beautiful things. Enjoying rest, marriage, success, and peace. These are all viewed as positive, beautiful things in this framework.
That makes a lot of sense. It actually reminds me of a painkiller.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, a painkiller is this incredible tool for relief, right? If you're injured, it's a blessing. But if you take it every single day when you aren't actually in pain,
You become completely dependent on it.
right, you become a slave to it. It stops being a tool and starts controlling you.
That is exactly what the text warns about. It says the true danger isn't the comfort itself, it's the moment comfort controls you.
Because when it controls you, what happens?
Your discipline completely disappears. You become spiritually and mentally lazy. The text points out that people start actively avoiding responsibility because, taking responsibility for something is inherently uncomfortable.
It requires friction.
Right. It requires you to sacrifice your own peace for a greater good. So if comfort rules you, you default to only doing things when they feel easy.
So then, who are the people who actually get this right, according to the source?
The text argues that the strongest people aren't those who suffer needlessly or play the martyr.
Okay.
The strongest people are those who have learned how to endure necessary discomfort without losing themselves. The source uses this really beautiful phrase. It says they stay soft-hearted but disciplined.
Soft-hearted but disciplined. Wow. I mean, that is just a powerful combination of words.
It really is.
Because being soft-hearted means you haven't become bitter or cynical. Right. You haven't shut down your empathy.
Exactly.
But being disciplined means you still hold the line. You still do what you're supposed to do, regardless of how you feel on a random Tuesday.
And the text also describes them as being kind, but mentally strong. They don't let the desire for a friction-free day stop them from having a messy conversation that needs to happen or doing the hard work required to grow.
Right. Well, to sum all this up for you listening right now, we've covered a lot of ground today. And I think the core takeaway from this deep dive is this. Everybody wants the reward, but very few people want the process.
So true. Everyone wants the result without the friction.
Exactly. We all want the peace, the success, the great relationships, but comfort is a beautiful thing that, if you get too much of it, can slowly steal your purpose.
It's sneaky like that.
It is. It erodes your discipline and your strength without you even realizing it's happening.
Until life actually hits you and you realize you have no resilience built up.
Right. So, as we wrap up today, we want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to ponder after this deep dive ends.
Yeah, something to really chew on.
Uh-huh.
If true character is forged strictly in the fires of discomfort, if it requires that friction, what is a specific uncomfortable conversation or task that you've been avoiding today simply because your routine felt safer?
Oh, that's a good question.
And more importantly, what version of yourself is waiting on the other side of that friction?
That is the perfect question to end on. Step out of the padded room and see what you're actually capable of. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.